Stability stage is the one our family and friends have been waiting for. We promised them if they would help us to work on our manias and our depressions, that then we would turn our focus to our relationships and our behaviors. So that's where we are now. But before we decide we're in the stability stage, we have to make sure we've successfully done the freedom stage loop several times, both in depression and in mania. Now remember, we want to do it in the mania side and we want to avoid the depression. But next time we get depressed, we're going to find out we're not stable at all. So we want to make sure we do it in both areas. Now, how do we assess to make sure? The important thing at this stage is to reassess everything. So do all of the assessments all over again. The functionality assessments, the friends and family assessments, and that one should be the major determining factor. If we can't convince our family and friends that we're stable, then perhaps we're not. So family and friends is important, but also the one about assessing for time. The accounting for time assessment, if we're not able to successfully stay in the states that we generally get in for at least a month, then we're not ready. So once we've satisfied all of the requirements, we're ready to actually start in on the program. The first step is to do a serious life plan. And when we talked about life planning in the beginning, we said great thing to do a visualization, but then we started talking about the need to skip that life plan while we were in the managed stage and in the freedom stage, because we didn't want to get in the way of those important processes. But now that we're stable, it's time for us to actually look at our real life plan. And we haven't focused at all so far on our social life, our relationships, and our career and finances. In this new life plan, we're going to look at 1 day, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and 2 year, and cover our whole lives: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, career, and financial. And make sure that all of those parts are coordinated together, but also making sure that we've created a vision that we really want to create in a couple of years. Once we've done that, we're ready to move into the actual exercises and the tools to move through the stability stage. Now, if you've been using medicine both to get managed stage reduced and also as a tool to expand your range in the freedom stage, you may still want to use medicine in the stability stage. There are many people who have become stable who still see it as a valuable tool. On the other hand, if you've been opposed to medicine or you just as soon get off, maybe by now you've worked with your doctor to limit the amount to a point that you may be able to even start considering getting off, at least as you graduate through stability stage. So it's a good time to start looking at those options. Now, if you've been opposed to medicine from the start and you've gotten to stability stage, you've just proved to everyone that it's possible. And congratulations for doing that. A lot of controversy is around the need for medicine. The more people who can do it without is more proof that we can do it without. Now, the other aspect that kind of combines with medicine is psychotherapy. By the time you get to stability stage, you're pretty much past regular psychotherapy. They tend to focus on helping us through the disability, but they're not so focused on the in-order side of it. What happens is they get you to here, and then the insurance companies won't pay anymore because they don't want us to move towards health, which is really unfortunate. But there are a lot of therapists that can really help us move towards health in a really positive way. Some of the Jungian therapists and a lot of the therapists who talk about how we find meaning in our lives, acceptance and commitment therapists, in a lot of areas in that direction could really be quite helpful with us as we do this. Well, another area that's majorly helpful is getting spiritual help. We're moving in a spiritual and social direction. Having expertise in those areas are great. Well, since we're also focusing on the social area, a marriage and family counselor can be invaluable at this point because we're going to really zone in on how our behaviors are and how it's affecting our relationships. So they're going to be able to help teach us a lot of the tools that haven't really been taught by society to us and is the source of a lot of problems in the world. We're going to learn how to apologize when we do wrong, but also how to keep relationships working together and strengthen our communications for them. So a marriage and family therapist is a great tool. If you haven't already brought it in, this is a stage where they play a central role. Now, I mentioned before that this is the part our family and friends have been waiting for, is for us to start focusing on our relationships. And that's the central focus of the stability stage. We want to really start taking a serious look at our behaviors and how that's been affecting the way we relate to people. Well, we have a tendency to wish other people would change. We want them to change, and we want to be able to find the perfect mate or the perfect relationship based on them. And we're going to find the perfect relationship when we become the perfect one. When we focus on our own behaviors and change the way we act, it might stimulate others to want to change themselves. But we can't expect that of them. We can't think that all we have to do is talk everybody else into changing the things we don't like about them. From a deep spiritual standpoint, we have to look at the people around us and the behaviors they have as opportunities for us to learn. The reason they've been put in the world with us and the reason they act the way they do is to help us to learn about ourselves. If we would become completely saintly and act perfect in all situations, well, maybe then we would be able to say we're setting a role model and give people advice on how to change. But since most of us aren't even remotely close to there, we don't want to start telling other people to change. We want to work on ourselves. That's the more important place for us to focus. So let's start talking about the bipolar and order tools. The first one, feelings versus reactions, really takes effect in the stability stage. We weren't ready to really face these issues before. We talked about just slightly perusing them, but now we want to dig in deeply into them. So we want to start looking at our feelings even when they get intense and how we react to them. We want to look at the feelings just outside of our comfort zone and really get clear on what those feelings are, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and get a real good sense of them, and then get a real good sense of what are our choices on how to respond to those feelings. So when we start to recognize that all of the feelings have nothing to do with our reactions to them, and we can change from habitual reactions that are based on how we're feeling or what mood we're in to situational reactions, saying when I'm in this kind of a situation, no matter how I feel and no matter what mood I'm in, what would be the proper way to respond to it? How should I act in a given situation becomes a lot more important than how am I feeling right now. And when we can do that, we start to have more control of our behaviors and play a better role in every situation that we're in. Well, getting control of our behaviors leads right into that idea of behavior inventory. And now's the time to really focus on that. Behavior inventory is the central focus of stability stage. We want to get really clear on every single behavior we do. We want to be hyper vigilant of how we're behaving, because if we're truly stable, we can afford to be vigilant. We can afford to really look at ourselves and really make the work necessary so we can change ourselves. The beginning of that work is to create an inventory of all of the behaviors we do. It's important for us to recognize that our actions in any given situation are what matters. So having a clear behavior inventory can help us greatly. We can recruit all of our friends and family members and have them help point out behaviors to us. They've been waiting for this. Remember, some of them have been keeping a list for us because we've agreed with them not to point them out to us while we were working through freedom stage. So let's recruit them now and let's bring that out. And in a manner that says, I'm going to face those now. Because if we say, I'm sorry for some of my behaviors that haven't worked, and I'm making a sincere effort to make changes of them, they're not likely to pick on us and beat us up for them. They're likely to dole them out as we grow, but encourage us, because changing our behaviors is incredibly difficult. So let's get an inventory and let's start adding to that inventory of all of the good and bad behaviors that we have that will move us in the direction that we really need to go at this point. Once we have a set of behaviors in our inventory, we can wade through those and pick some of the highlights. So then we can see what kind of thoughts we're having, what kind of actions we're having, and if we're living according to our beliefs. And that's what the introspection process is. We only want 5 to 7 of our thoughts, 5 to 7 of our actions, and 5 to 7 of our spiritual exercises or beliefs, and write those down and put those into our introspection process. It's time to really introspect deeply about what are we doing throughout the day. So remember, introspection is I write them down, I review them every night for a couple of minutes. They're only yes or no questions, so that's easy to do. And then we let our subconscious mind monitor us all day long. Well, now we're going to take introspection to a new level. We're going to introspect constantly, if we can. So we don't want to totally wear ourselves out and beat ourselves up on this, but we want to start implementing an introspection process that says I'm paying attention consciously during the day while I'm out there behaving, while I'm interacting with people. Try to review that as it's happening, and then just afterwards, I've just completed an interaction with somebody, and as I walk away, I kind of make a mental note. How did I act? Why did I say the things I did? Why did I act in the ways I did? And how could I have done better? So we don't want to turn this into beating ourselves up. But as we do this, we start to recognize that we are acting better. So we need that acceptance piece in there to say, I accept that I'm doing very serious work on myself. I'm accepting that I'm a flawed human being, but I'm working on it. And that'll make a big difference in the way we perceive this process. But in a very short period of time, we're going to be able to look back at ourselves and say, compared to 6 months ago, compared to a year ago, I'm doing things much better than I was. We're also going to end up seeing that we've got a lot more flaws than we originally thought. So this idea that we can always look back 6 months or a year or even 2 years and see a difference in ourselves is going to be a major contributing factor to us keeping up the process. Now, one of the things that's really going to keep us motivated is our meditation process. Because if we've been doing it half an hour a day and an hour once a week, we're going to be really getting benefits from it by now. We're not only going to be seeing that it makes us feel peaceful in the meditation, and especially towards the end and just after, we're going to see how that process affects us throughout the day. We're going to stop for a traffic light and all of a sudden take that moment to feel peace. We're going to have moments throughout the day where we just feel it, or because of the habitual nature of us bringing our mind to that spot, it's going to go there very easily now. What we want to do is we want to up the level of that. We've talked about the simple processes of counting our breath and looking for peace. Now we want to turn this into a more intense process. One way to do that is to up the time. So if we could meditate 45 minutes to an hour a day, or even better, every morning and every night, and then take a 3-hour section once a week. Let's say Thursday night from 6 to 9 p.m. I'm going to do a 3-hour chunk of meditation. That's going to really strengthen all of my practices. So extending our time is a big one, but also deepening the practice. So we talked about these simple counting our breath practices. Those are simple forms of pranayama. Pranayama really means learning to control the flow of the energy and information. So let's start looking into some of the techniques that are much deeper and really focus on just that flow that's going up our spine to this part of our brain and then back down our spine, and start learning how to send that energy all around our bodies, out to our hands, out to our feet, bringing it back in and back up to the mind. Let's start practicing those kinds of pranayama techniques, and you'll be amazed at how fast things start to come together for us. We start reaching some depths of states that we couldn't imagine before, but now that we've built up the practice and started to see some of the beginning stages of that, we can move forward very rapidly if we start committing to a much stronger practice of it. Stability stage is also the time for us to really start challenging the definitions. What does mania really mean? What does depression really mean? And I think most importantly, who's even qualified to answer those things? Is it the people who can't survive depression, or is it the people who can go deep into depression and gain great insight from it? Start making those kinds of challenges to what the definitions are, at least internally. So one of the great processes now is write down, what do you think mania really means from this standpoint of stability? What does depression really mean from the standpoint of stability? Start challenging what the definitions that everyone else is willing to accept really are. Because only by looking deeper into that do we start to really understand it so much better. So challenging definitions runs right into wrestling with an idea. Wrestling with an idea is the same concept, only taken longer. We want to take one particular idea and just wrestle with that over and over again for 8 months to a year. So the idea we're going to pick for this one, for stability stage, is why did St. Teresa say, the pain is still there, it bothers me so little now that I feel my soul is served by it. Now that applies to bipolar specifically for me because I did this exercise. What we want to do is come up with the immediate idea of what she meant by that. And at least in my experience, that idea was frivolous compared to the end. But in about 2 months, I started actually getting mad at St. Teresa of Avila. Because why did she say the pain is still there, it bothers me so little, when it clearly bothered her? She was bedridden because of the pain. So it took me a long time to sort through that, and I came to some profound conclusions because of that. I'm hoping that your process will produce some of the same kind of results. So the idea is we wrestle and we keep thinking about a concept, in this case St. Teresa's quote, and we don't let go of it. And that doesn't mean we obsessively think about it 24 hours a day. We're really working on our behaviors, and we're working on all of the other tools in stability stage. But every day we should at least remind ourselves that we're trying to come up with the meaning behind the idea that we wrestle with. So take this concept and work it. And if the St. Teresa quote doesn't make sense, pick a different one. But pick something that really challenges you deeply, because that's what you want to do. You want to challenge your mind deeply to wrestle with a concept for a long period of time. And it usually takes 8 months to a year for us to really work our way through things and come to a much deeper understanding of it. It's also time to start looking for value in all of our experiences. We talked about this in the freedom stage, that unless you can see value in those parts outside of where you are, you're never going to go there, or when you are there, you're going to try to get back right away and never return. We need to find reasons that there is value in all of our experiences. So searching for value needs to become a more central role in this. We want to start looking at all of the stages that we do get to, but even the stages of outside of where we've been, we need to start looking for value in that. One place to find that is with fellow travelers. Joining our forums and discussions with other people who have already been there and asking them, what is it that they found value in? And not challenging them to some kind of debate that you have to win, because they clearly know something that perhaps you don't. Because they have been able to find value in states where you can't. Look at them as the experts and try to find out from them why they think that way. Finding value is a critical place for us to be able to find equanimity. Because when we can value every part of our lives, we can start working towards equanimity. Because that's exactly what equanimity means. We have value, we see beauty in every part of our lives. We recognize that we have preferences. I would prefer to be slightly hypomanic over deeply depressed, for example. But that doesn't mean I don't find value in a deep depression. One of the reasons I say for example is because it's not true in my case. I actually prefer depression over mania And here's why. Depression is so much easier to do. When you get to self-mastery, you come to realize that depression is the easy side. You don't have all this excess energy to deal with. It's not as much work. Once you get past the fact that I don't want to resist it anymore, and you start just being able to go with it, it's the easier state to have. Equanimity doesn't mean that I don't have preferences of one over another. Equanimity means that I've learned to see value in every experience of my life, and I try to view all experiences as equally valued. Well, that doesn't mean they're not differently valued. I might value one thing in one way and another thing in a different way, but I see all of them as equal in terms of their ability to be part of my life and bring value to me. So we want to start practicing equanimity at this stage. The easiest way to do that is in the physical realm. Interesting experiment is next time you bang your shins, practice equanimity. Instead of jumping up and down and cursing, try to just feel the flow of energy and information coming from your shins up to your brain, and how intense it is, and how rich it is, and how detailed it is, and how incredibly painful it is. And try to have the presence of mind of, instead of jumping up and down on it and potentially injuring yourself, to calmly and rationally look and make sure you're not bleeding or hurt. Make a decision of having broken something. Do you need to go to the doctor and take care of it? It's not we're ignoring things. It's actually that we're paying even more attention to them, but we're seeing them from a standpoint of equanimity. That sounds like a wild thing, but next time you bang your shins and you try it, you're going to suddenly realize that what I'm talking about is true. You can actually feel it more intensely and more painfully without suffering from it as much. The suffering turns out to be my resistance to it and wishing it would go away. Allowing the flow to come to our brain isn't the problem. It's the resistance to the flow that's causing undue suffering for us. The signal coming to our brain isn't suddenly happy, it's incredibly painful. And that's something deeply profound that a lot of people don't understand because they haven't actually practiced it. So do that. Next time you bang your shins, try to practice equanimity there. Next time you find yourself in a difficult situation, try to practice equanimity. One of the problems people have is they try to practice equanimity when everything's going great, when everything's peaceful. And what they're doing is they're building up this need for circumstances to be just so in order for them to feel equanimity. They're actually doing the opposite. They're saying, when I'm in this peaceful state, I can feel it. When I'm in this state, I can't. So it's more important to look for equanimity in the difficult times. It's the difficult times that give us the opportunity to feel true equanimity, not in the times when everything's going great for us. So that's an overview of the whole process. This is a wonderful state to be in. When we enter stability stage, our growth escalates incredibly. We start noticing that compared to 5 years ago, we're incredibly better, but compared to a year ago, we can even see major improvements. And then when another year goes by, it seems like we've improved 5 times as much. And another 6 months goes by, and we've improved even faster. And that's what happens in stability stage, is the time it takes for us to make major changes and major improvements in our lives starts to escalate. And that's the reward in itself, is that we see ourselves capable of accomplishing more and more faster every time we re-go through it. So this is a great time. Congratulations for getting to stability, but now the work really starts, but it's wonderful work.